Sherri, I've been thinking a lot about those neural connections that happen in the way kids are formed and the brains are formed, and then how that impacts the way we react. You mentioned something earlier about the ability to respond in a pressure situation, or the way your point guard, she got to where she could just control everything. And you use the term unconditional love, that you saw that in the home. Well, the kids that haven't experienced that unconditional love in parenting, all of a sudden they react to pressured situations differently, don't you think?
Oh, there's no question. Joe, I remember clearly, vividly, a preseason team meeting deep into my coaching career where we were going through our standards, our values, our mission, our ways of behavior. And I said almost in passing, before we even speak about any of these, we have to all understand and agree that we're operating from a foundation of unconditional love. And I just said it like that and went right on into the next thing. And I noticed at least three players on my team, you could see in their eyes that unconditional love didn't, and I had to rewind that, reel that in, and go about, first of all, the modeling. Our coaching staff had to model that, but the teaching of what that is, because it was a foreign concept to some of those kids. And all of those standards of behavior, that value system that I had outlined, really sat on nothing, because they didn't understand that if they reached for one of those standards and missed, or if they ignored it and went the other way, we didn't stop loving them. They didn't understand that. They couldn't comprehend that, because their value up until that point had been about what you can do. If you don't score 30 points, you're of no value to me. If you don't go get a college education, you're of no value to this family. If you don't, whatever. I mean, there's just a list of those things. And so rewinding that and talking about what it is and showing those student athletes what it looks like and what it feels like was incredibly important. But for a kid, if you can imagine, you make this shot, people love you. You miss this shot, people don't love you. The difficulty level of that shot goes through the roof. And if we don't, as coaches, I mean, you mentioned my book and my roots. I was raised with unconditional love all over the place. My immediate family, my teachers, my coaches, my church family. Those shots weren't that hard for me, because if I missed them, everybody's going to love me just the same. So I have trouble feeling what that athlete feels, the pressure, the weight of that particular shot or play or outcome. And they have trouble understanding how I feel about it. And so bridging that is incredibly important and incredibly difficult for coaches.
You said that if you went more than 6 weeks without an individual meeting with a player, it became difficult for you to coach them. What that's talking about is that players are the product of things that are going on in their lives, not just what's going on the court. And good coaches are responding to those events, those things. And that includes the ability for someone to have the right zone that they're in to take that last shot, to want to experience that collectively as a team instead of it all being on me. And all of that is just fascinating to me. Talk a little bit more about what that means when you talk about those individual meetings and the difference of knowing a player versus not knowing them.
Well, you can't coach them well. You can't guide them to their best performances or to reach their maximum capacity if you don't know them. I think that's true in a business with leaders off the court. I think it's true in a family. If you're trying to raise your kids, if you don't really know who they are, it's really, really difficult to help them maximize their own gifts and become who they want to be. So I think that's true across the board. It's not just for coaching. But one of the things that I struggled with in having these individual meetings with players, especially late in my collegiate coaching career when NCAA guidelines became so tight that you could only spend a certain amount of time with kids. I really felt that closing in on me, because that was when I felt like I did my best work, was when I spent individual time with them and got to know them so that I knew what buttons to push and how to motivate them and how to help them on the court. But it was so important to me that I kept a little secret calendar in my drawer, because I felt like when you schedule relationship meetings, they become inorganic and you're like, this feels unnatural and maybe even insincere. And yet if you don't keep track of it, life happens, time happens, and you talk to all those kids that are super easy to talk to and that are willing to come in your door and sit down on the couch and just start talking. And you look up and it's been 3 weeks and you've not had a one on one with that kid who probably needs it the most, but is the hardest to pin down and try to have that time with. And so I kept a little schedule, if you will, in my desk drawer where I would just write the date down when we had a one on one. And a one on one could be going to Sonic to get a slushie, it could be taking a walk around campus. I had one kid who I tried and tried and tried in my office, and I could get nothing. She shared nothing. One day I asked her if she'd like to go on a walk, and we went on a walk around campus and walking shoulder to shoulder with our eyes both forward. She told me all kinds of stuff. And we never tried to sit in my office again to talk. We had weekly walks and we went around campus, and it was awesome. And so there are lots of different ways. Sometimes you rebound for them. I mean, probably the best relationships I ever developed with players came with me just chasing the ball down and throwing it back to them and talking while we're doing it. But that's what enables you to not only motivate them for maximum performance, but to help them become who they want to become and navigate the fears and the challenges and the pressures of their lives. Those things that we can't know about if we don't ask. And I think that's another subject entirely, but coaches need to ask a whole lot of questions.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. The simple brain science and also great common wisdom is players don't care what you know until they know that you care, right? And the brain actually responds differently to someone who you trust than it does to someone saying the same thing when you don't trust them. And so building those relationships, every coach knows it matters, but I think we tend to get in the rat race of a season and we forget how much that matters. And
It's the prioritization of it, for sure.
yeah,
For sure. You go to coaching clinics and everybody wants a hack. They want to play. They want the end of the game play, or they want an inbounds play that'll get them a bucket, or they want something specific, some little hack that helps them win a game. And if you go to a coaching clinic and you start talking to coaches about this stuff, they don't want to hear it. They want to walk out the door. And this is the stuff that gives you a chance to run the end of the gameplay to have a chance to win, because you're not going to even be in that position without this.
so let me pull on that for a second. So take an end of game pressure situation and you've got to play, but what are you saying in the huddle to address that other stuff, right? The confidence piece or take us into one of those huddles.
I always tried to orchestrate those end of game huddles when you had that this is a do or die situation with questions. Okay, who wants to make this pass? Who wants to make this pass? And we know who we want to make that pass, and the players typically do too. But you want that kid to say, I want to make it. I want to make it. And then, all right, who wants to set the screen? Ooh, I do, I do, I do. And I can think of 3 games off the top of my head, one at Oklahoma State, one in Poughkeepsie, New York. I can think of 3 games off the top of my head where at the end of the game, I asked those questions. And I believe in my heart that because those players made the decisions about what they wanted to do, they worked. And again, we'd practiced it. They knew what to do. We all knew. I knew I wanted Amanda Thompson setting that screen, and I knew I wanted Naisha Stevenson to shoot that 3. But them deciding in the moment, and I said, I want it. I want that shot. Perfect. Now she has given herself the confidence, because I truly believe that that's where it comes from. You give it to yourself. And so as coaches, we set up the environment. We create the stage for those players to choose that confidence. And I think that's what those late game timeouts are about, setting the stage so that they can make those decisions.
That's awesome. We talk about the difference of achievement goals versus avoidance goals. And what you've done by asking those questions is you put the player in a mindset of, hey, this is something I want to achieve. This is something I want to accomplish, rather than I'm afraid to fail. And so by your questioning, you're putting the brain, really their brains, in a better framework. And the other aspect that we talk about is there's a power differential between the coach and a player that's a good thing. And yet there's real value in sharing the team experience, right? That she's not making that shot for you as the coach, but for us. And there's that ownership that's a whole different kind of experience. And interestingly enough, the brain is made for that kind of connection, and it operates best in that what we call the brotherhood or the sisterhood, the team concept, the family concept. It operates better in that environment than it does the solo. We've all seen athletes that just try to put their team on their back and be the star, and sometimes that works, but that's not as healthy of a place as, hey, we're doing this together.
No question. No question. The strength and the buoyancy from that brotherhood or sisterhood elevates what you already have inside.
Yeah, that's great. How are some ways that you help players handle pressure situations? Not everybody's innately good at it. So, what are some ways that you try to help develop that?
Well, I think you give them as many as you possibly can. You make it a customary thing. Like it's like running to the other end of the floor and back. So every day in practice, you create as many pressure situations as you possibly can in as many different ways, about as many different things. Some of them are really important. You win that. I say really important. You win this game if you make the shot. Some of them don't have as much weight as that, but I think you just vary that and you throw those things out because confidence comes from demonstrated ability. The more confidence you have, the less pressure you feel. The more times you face pressure and handle it, the more confident you are. So you're giving them a chance to demonstrate that ability over and over and over. And there's this really safe place to fail. You don't make the free throw and everybody's got to run a sprint. Okay, nobody dies. Everything's good. It's okay. We move right on, and then you face it the next time. But I think we make a mistake when we try to protect kids from all that, and then there is a pressure situation, and suddenly they don't know what to do with it,
Yeah,
which is sort of a soapbox I jump on about the importance of athletics because it's giving kids this opportunity to handle hard things before it really matters. Because it really doesn't matter in a basketball game or a football game or a tennis match. It really doesn't matter in the great scheme of things. It's a game. But the skills that they develop from handling those hard things in the games will matter in life beyond the lines. And so it's important to expose them to things so that they can demonstrate their ability to handle it.
you're building resilience in their life. You're creating predictable, moderate doses of stress that builds that resilience, as opposed to just putting them into an environment where it's overwhelming. And that's one of the great things, you're right, about sports. That a lot of the trauma experts talk about how those experiences of predictable, moderate, limited doses of stress are what builds the resilience and allows kids to grow out of trauma into resilience. So I'm with you on the sports side. That's really interesting.